silver-suited moon man is the icon of MTV. He appears on T-shirts, in commercials, and statuettes of his likeness are given out during award shows. But what most members of the MTV generation don't realize is that the moon man is a real man. His name is Edgar Mitchell, just one of a dozen men who have walked on the lunar surface and looked back at the Earth spinning silently in space. And of the 12 moon men in this elite fraternity, Edgar Mitchell has perhaps the strangest story to tell. You could say it was my first interview with a true extraterrestrial. The sixth man to walk on the moon, Edgar Mitchell still lives in the area of the Kennedy Space Center and its imposing launch tower. Perhaps it's only fitting, because the journey that began for Mitchell here in 1971 changed his life in profound, and he says, mystical ways. While much has been written about the ill-fated voyage of Apollo 13, Mitchell's mission, Apollo 14, was no less historic. Edgar Mitchell, Stuart Roosa, and the mission commander, Alan Shepard, all had something to prove. This mission had to work if NASA had any hope of keeping the space program on track. When the rocket motors begin to roar and shake, do you feel anything, or are you lost in the moment?
No, you feel it. I compare it to a vertical subway. Those big engines are gimbling to keep us balanced on that thrust vector. And so you feel that motion coming up through the structure. And then there's as much visualization as anything. Hey, we're on our way.
When was the first time that you had a moment for reflection?
During the rest periods, you had time to be reflective, to look out the window a little bit, and to say, my, what am I doing here in this utterly magnificent cosmos? You know, look at that Earth over there. Look at that moon over there. Wow, look at those stars, 10 times as many as you can see on Earth. A wondrous experience to see the universe from that perspective.
Apollo 14 was a textbook mission, but what Alan Shepard and Stuart Roosa didn't know was that along with the scientific experiments ordered by NASA, Edgar Mitchell was secretly conducting an unusual experiment of his own. Mitchell may have been an astrophysicist by training, but he was a student of the paranormal by desire. When did you start to know about and talk about the things that were rather exceptional for a scientist? Your interest in ESP and so forth. What was that based in? When did it start?
I was initially very skeptical, very standoffish from all of this, till I had a few events happen that said, well, maybe let's look at it a little bit.
Such as?
Well, I had some people that I respected say, well, you really ought to look at this. There's some things going on that maybe you're not aware of. And so I started reading the literature and discovered there were some rather eminent people in science that had done some very good work that was being dismissed. And that got my curiosity up.
In a lunar crater called Fra Mauro, Mitchell and Shepard planted the American flag, collected mineral samples, and then, without the knowledge or consent of NASA, Mitchell began the world's only interplanetary psychic test. Mitchell attempted to telepathically communicate a series of classic ESP symbols hundreds of thousands of miles through space to a group of friends and one professional psychic back on Earth.
It turns out that the professional scored very, very highly, but he also reported to the press what we were doing.
What caused you to risk an ESP experiment in Apollo 14?
That's just my nature, I guess. The question was, if this is real, and if it's something science says is not real, but it is real, then we as scientists in the purest sense of discovering the unknown are derelict in what we're doing. And that intrigued me.
From the moment he left the surface of the moon, everything was different. Edgar Mitchell may have been an astronaut, naval commander, and an MIT PhD, but the press labeled him a flake for his ESP experiment. The criticism was of little consequence, however, because Edgar Mitchell came back to Earth a changed man. He had seen the big picture.
The basic event is to see Earth like this in the cosmos like this. And I experienced that as others have as an aha, as a getting out of the trees and looking at the forest, a mountaintop experience. It made me realize that what I knew or had learned about us had some flaws in it. And I think, being a pretty good scientist and a pretty good explorer, I said, this doesn't fit my answers. Let's go find out why my answers are wrong.
Since completing his half-million-mile trip to the moon and back 25 years ago, Edgar Mitchell has been on an intensive inner voyage of discovery. He's written a book about his experiences titled The Way of the Explorer. In it, he discusses his controversial views about the origin of consciousness and the power of the mind. He also reveals his belief that we're not alone in the universe.
Life evolved everywhere in the universe, that the physical conditions were sufficient or benign enough to allow life to evolve. And that means it's ubiquitous in the universe, not just on our little segment of the universe like we previously thought, both in science and in religion.
Ironically, the man who cruised the stars grew up in Roswell, New Mexico, and in his book, Mitchell asserts that what crashed there in 1947 isn't at all what the Air Force insists it is. He believes there are alien craft and creatures.
Well, I will start out by saying I have no first-hand experience with UFO and alien business, but in recent years I have been in contact with people within government, more than one government, other than ours, whose official duties while they were in government did bring them into contact with information and events that they claim are clearly first-hand encounters with UFOs, extraterrestrials, and so forth. And I find them very credible. They are good military people, like myself. They are patriotic government citizens of sound mind, of the level of rather senior military officers and senior government officials. They've had these experiences, they claim they're real, and I tend to believe them.
Then what's the purpose of the classification, would you think?
I think that goes back many, many years when we were just coming out of World War II, where the communist threat was seen to be very severe. It was not clear whether these were extraterrestrials or maybe Soviet developments. It's amazing it's been that way for 40 years or more, but that seems to be the case. And in my opinion, all rationale for keeping this from the public has long since vanished. There's no reason to do that anymore. The public deserves to know.
He has explored the mysterious expanse of outer space and continues to journey through uncharted territory as he studies the mysteries of the human mind. Edgar Mitchell is a trailblazer with an open mind.